Right, I'd like to begin with some thank yous. I'd like to thank CIPFA for the invitation to speak here. Lots of people have been thanking me for organising this conference, which isn't true. So I'd like to thank Elisa Gomez and all the team from DOP who really did carry out the organisation at this site. I'd also like to thank the event sponsors. The good news for the event sponsors is that in our governance report we identify some work that they were involved in as best practice within the Commission, so they picked the right conference to sponsor. Now, I want to talk about actually using the good governance in the public sector framework, which is the CIPFA IFAC framework, which really played a big role in what we did. We thought long and hard, and then longer still, before we decided to do this audit on governance. We thought there were many reasons for doing it, but we also knew it was going to be a tough challenge. I don't know if any of you remember Fantastic Voyage, one of the films of the 1960s. In which a miniature submarine is injected into someone's bloodstream and gets into the brain to deal with a blood clot or something. You'll have to watch it for yourselves. But one of our objectives was to get inside the brain of our auditee, to really see how decisions get made. And we didn't have a miniature submarine, so that was always going to be difficult. The second thing which is difficult is governance is one of those things that you can't count. It's all about qualities. It wasn't the easiest topic from that point of view. And the third issue is diversity, because, and I guess this is the general problem with international frameworks of this kind, everyone's different and everyone thinks they're special, and everyone thinks that these international rules somehow need a bit of tinkering with before they could be applied locally. So there are a few hazards in the way. Nevertheless, I think it was essential that we did this. And I think one of the questions in our mind was, why does it sometimes take so long for our recommendations, which are good recommendations, well-founded recommendations, excellent recommendations, why does it sometimes take so long for these recommendations to be put into effect? And I see the question like this. The auditor inevitably, I think, sees the auditee as having these qualities, as being rational, as basing its decisions on evidence, as being altruistic, as being there to maximize public utility. You cannot be an auditor and not write your recommendations on any other basis. You have to write it on the basis that it's something like this. Now, I didn't study accountancy at university, I studied politics, and political scientists have a sort of different view of organizations. They say organizations are interested in growing in size, growing in prestige, they fight turf wars, they want a bigger budget, so there's quite a contrast between the way we have to write our recommendations, the way we have to formulate our recommendations, and the way a lot of people would see public sector bodies really working. And, Alan yesterday said that this is the year of post-truth, but I just, who would the public believe? Do the public really believe that public sector bodies are like the bodies we write recommendations for, or do they think they're a bit different? So my conclusion from this is that the governance helps getting governance right helps turn the bodies you're looking at into the sort of bodies which are rational, altruistic, evidence-based, all those qualities. So if you really want to have an impact, you've got to have some governance focus to the work you're doing. And CIPFA IFAC, I thought, really was a fantastic framework for that. I mean, it is very much directed at turning into organisations into altruistic, rational, public utility maximisers. It's really a broad framework, and frankly, in this report, we did not take the whole of this globe, and I recommend that globe for further study, but we didn't take all of it. I asked myself whether we could have done this if CIPFA didn't exist. And I think the answer is yes, because it's not the only thing out there. I mean, there's PIFA, there's COSO, there's the International Integrated Reporting Council. There are many places where you can look at for best practice, but there was nothing else which really brought it together. And bringing it together was really important in terms of having something that we could work with. Now, in this governance report, effectively, we focused on parts F and G. So this is managing risk and improving financial management. When I use the word focus, I do not mean to say that we exclusively looked at. We looked at the whole of the framework, but most of our work was in this area. The things the framework says in this area are very concrete and I think really very good to work with. I think that is in line with the focus of our work, because in this work we were taking as a starting point the year 2000 reforms in the Commission, and specifically the financial management, audit and accountability aspects of those reforms. And so there was a good fit between the parts of the framework we were using and our subject matter for this audit. But that isn't to say that it's the only thing that we wanted to look at. To give you some idea of what we found, I want to focus just on two aspects of. I mean, we made many recommendations in this report, but I just wanted to look at two aspects of those recommendations. One is what we recommended in terms of the internal processes of the European Commission in this instance. One is in terms of external facing activities. Sometimes, I mean, I've been working with the European Commission as a client, I suppose, for 20 years, and sometimes a phrase of Mrs. Thatcher comes to my mind. Mrs. Thatcher very famously said, "There's no such thing as society," meaning that society is made up of a lot of individuals. And I've sometimes had the same impression about the European Commission. There is no such thing as the European Commission. There are individual DGs with their own policies and activities and aims, and getting them to cooperate. I mean, I deal a lot with people who try and work at the centre. Getting them to cooperate, getting them to work in the same direction is really tough. And I'm sure if you came and looked at us, you might find the same thing here in the Court of Auditors. This is not unique to any organisation. All organisations, I think, are something like this. One of the things you see in that governance framework is an emphasis on having a strong internal audit committee. And we thought this was a really key recommendation to make. Because if you have a strong audit committee, with a lot of independent members, with people with their own expertise in these areas, you put together a mechanism in which the validity of all sorts of claims being made, whether it's in terms of financial reporting or in performance reporting, get tested before they get published. And we saw a big opportunity for the Commission to strengthen its audit committee, which it did strengthen 15 years ago, but what looked quite good 15 years ago doesn't necessarily look state-of-the-art now, by turning it into a committee with a majority of independent and external members, to make sure that it covered, as well as everything else, financial reporting, because financial reporting is actually, at the moment, something which bypasses the Audit Progress Committee, and to bring more things into its field of activities. One of those I think really ought to be performance reporting. Another, we've got a number of valued colleagues from the Commission here who deal in the ex post verification of expenditure. And we noticed that their work doesn't directly go to the audit committee. So there's all sorts of judgments that the Commission is making about its own activities where only some of that information goes through the audit committee. We wanted that to become a really wide-ranging committee and a really strong committee, and I hope in due course the Commission will move in that direction. So that was the internal aspect, and the external aspect is, if you're really going to make your organisation accountable, if you're really going to make sure that you're focusing on the things that your stakeholders want you to focus on, you have to get it external reporting right. And the Commission had, on the one hand, a very good story to tell about financial reporting. Financial reporting was massively improved over the last 15 years. But all the things that normally go along with that in terms of telling the world how responsible people had discharged their duties, telling the world what the role of the audit committee was, and how risk management was tackled, getting performance reporting right, there was still a lot of work to do. So those were two areas, and I think those are the two key areas which emerged from that part of the for the framework, where we see some really significant scope to make things better. So I hope that gives you an idea of what we've done. And my final slide is about what we might do in the future. And the first thing we might do is, I think, explicitly use the rest of that, the CIPFA IFAC framework, because we focused on F and G. There's some great stuff in parts A, B, C, D that we could use in the future. And there are areas where we, I think, often make recommendations which are in practice aligned with that framework, but we don't really quote it, and we don't explicitly use it as the framework to which we're working. And I think that's something we must work on. And we've also become ambitious for the framework itself. We don't want it to become, we wouldn't like it to become a dead document. We would like it to be a living document. We would like it to be a document that gets periodically reviewed and updated, and perhaps becomes accompanied by some guidance. And we'd be very interested in getting involved in this. We'd be very interested in feeding back some of the lessons we learnt from trying to apply it back into the team, so that there will be one day a version 2 of the framework which takes account of our experiences. Anyway, well, thank you to CIPFA and IFAC for producing this document. And we've got Ian Ball here, who's one of the fathers of it, so it's a great pleasure to be talking to you about the use of this framework, Ian, and it really helped us produce, I think, an interesting and important audit. Thank you very much.